Hello, welcome to America Resurgent. We're going to interview or have a discussion with Colonel John Shulli. He is U.S. Senate candidate from Delaware. He was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware, and he is now running as a Republican in the U.S. Senate primary, which will take place on September 15, 2026. In the primary is another Republican, Dr. Mike Katz. The incumbent is the Democrat, U.S. Senator John Coons. Delaware has not had a Republican representing them in the U.S. Senate since Senator William Roth. That goes back a long way. It goes back about 25 years ago. We've had Tom Carper, we've had Joe Biden, we have Mr. Coons, but not a Republican. And we have not had a Republican in the U.S. House representing Delaware since Congressman Michael Castle back in 2010. So it's very much a blue state, at least where federal office is concerned. But now here we have Colonel John Shulli, who's going to try to change that. We'll see what you, the viewer, think of what he has to say. So I should point out that Colonel Shulli has served in the U.S. Armed Forces quite a long time. He was deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Is it Freedom? Iraqi Freedom? Back in 2003, and served in a staff position in Iraq. He tells me that he also was part of the entry into Baghdad. We thank him for his service. He also, I guess, concluded most of his active service in South Korea around the year 2000. He's now in Army Reserve status, but he's also teaching at the Army War College. So this is an individual bringing a great deal of experience to the role, would bring it to the role of representing us in the U.S. Senate. So he has a program which he calls American Renaissance. So I thought we would start off with him telling us a little bit about his overall approach if he has a chance to represent us in the U.S. Senate. Tell us about American Renaissance.
Right. First, thank you for the opportunity to be interviewed and have a conversation online. This is awesome. So when I was a brigade commander, it was my job to put mission first, but people always. Because protecting and growing the team enable us to win every time. And I want the same for the people of Delaware. Because for far too long, our state has been under single-party rule, as you pointed out, and to the detriment of us all. Our economy just kind of ticking down in Delaware. And it's mainly due to a leadership class that's only knows managed decline. So it's time for a new day for Delaware, where we build for the future while also protecting our heritage and land. Turn our state into the jobs factory of the 21st century. That's where I start talking about this Renaissance engine concept. It's essentially returning us to an American system of economics. Economics of revitalizing our domestic manufacturing base and our support for small business, which generates the majority of our employment and wealth in the United States, or any nation really, and have true energy independence. So we have the drill baby drill happening right now, but to be truly energy independent, we're going to need small modular reactors. There's already a huge push to make that happen. But if you can imagine, these small modular reactors will enable us to not only be energy independent, but also decentralize our sources of energy. So Delaware can stand alone in case New York, for some reason, goes out with a blackout.
We'll have a chance to go into that in some detail, I think, as we move through this discussion. Anything else you want to say, though, about your overall approach before we start getting into some of the details? Anything else?
Well, I think I should point out the institutional reforms that are required to make this American system of economics work. We got to have accountability in government. We got to have election integrity, through the Save America Act. MAHA, we got to protect our food. Reform in our healthcare. I mean, it's a huge effort to bring about this American Renaissance. It's not just a slogan. It is a layered approach to making this country essentially the best it's ever been. Great again.
Is there a thread running through all these institutional changes that you think we need to institute? Is there something that's common to all the changes that you think we need to bring about with our institutions?
Constitutional fidelity. You have to have unwavering protection of our rights and our Constitution. So folks on either side of the aisle will want to push a clutch and say, well, we don't really need this aspect of the Constitution. It's an old piece of paper, as Biden would say. Sticking to that document has been our 250 years of success. Mm-hmm. When we start wavering off that, that's when things start breaking down. Clamping down on our Second Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, our ability to say no to a shot during the pandemic.
So you're talking about rule of law. Basically, you're trying to uphold that, but not just any law, a constitutional law. All right, having said that, let's get into some of the detail now. So let's begin with the international situation. So if you were going to tell Delawareans, Americans for that matter, what is important on the international scene, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What's the first issue or region or country that we should be paying closer attention to?
Well, obviously, Iran's in the news right now. We should hit on that pretty first. Number one, nuclear weapons. You cannot allow the Iranian regime, as it stands now, to have nuclear weapons. It's a no-brainer. Even their, air quote allies, Russia and China, did not help them develop a nuclear weapon because even they know how crazy these guys can be. So taking Iran off the chessboard as a volatile actor on the world stage will enable a lot of these energy reforms we need the United States to work.
Let me bring it back. You said that the Iranian regime is crazy. Why do you say that about them?
Well, they want to wipe Israel off the map. They want to death to America. And there's no other nation on the planet that's chanting these things over and over again to their population and funding terrorist cells and other proxy forces to execute this form of foreign policy.
What would you say is the number one state sponsor of terror? What country?
So that would be Iran, for sure.
You'd say it would be Iran.
Yeah.
All right, so Iran's very much on your mind, and on the minds of most Americans. When we speak about Iran, then we talk about death through Israel. Of course, what comes to my mind is the Gaza war. So actually, we had a discussion before this, and I think you made some interesting points about that. What's your take on how Israel conducted that war? And just to set the scene for everybody, we're talking about the war. There's been quite a few Gaza wars, haven't there been? Yeah. We're talking about the war that started October 7, 2023. No question that Hamas committed a war crime or many war crimes on that very day. And then the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, responds. What do you think about his response as a whole? And can you break it into sections? And what do you think about the Biden administration's response to that and the Trump administration's response to that IDF response to the Gaza attack, to the Palestinian attack?
Right. So
attack.
The initial attack, you have to respond militarily. That's a no-brainer. I think what happened with the Israelis was that after the 100 days of war, of tamping down, pushing back the offensive capabilities of Hamas, they kept going. And we didn't have a strong American leader or administration that could pull back the reins on Israel. So from Israeli point of view, the Americans weren't saying stop. They were just saying we support Israel, we'll give them more weapons. And to the other side of their mouth, they were talking about, hey, we have to support the Palestinians. So from the Israeli point of view, they weren't getting strong indications of what to do from the American leadership. The populace of America was very much against Israeli action. But again, it's the administration that runs or shapes Israeli foreign policy. So if the administration is like hands off, let's see what happens. Israel's like, hey, we have a green light, let's keep going. Maybe we can, quote, solve the Hamas problem the old-fashioned way.
What would you, had you been in the U.S. Senate in the fall of 2023 and 2024, what might you have done that was not done?
Pull the plug on funding. Pass an act, say.
At what point would you have pulled the plug?
I would say after 100 days. I mean, this is just
so then you're
a round number.
But you're talking about military aid going to the Israeli forces. Is that what you mean by pulling the plug?
Right. So munitions, support, intel support, all support stops right away. Whether it be the 100-day mark or as soon as you can pass the legislation, is a strong, when the executive power doesn't have the ability to, put the brakes on, Congress has the ability to do so. So we pull the plug on the funding of the Department of War or then Department of Defense to move supplies and weapons to Israel. Huge, and even if it failed in Congress, the indication, the Israelis will see the handwriting on the wall. Hey, we need to stop because the Senate is now getting involved, going, this needs to stop. So again, there was no like red light coming from Washington for Bibi to say, okay, I should stop now. For him, there was a green light the whole way. And with Trump, to answer your question,
how would your response, the one if you'd been in the U.S. Senate, how would that be like or unlike what Senator Coons did and what Dr. Michael Katz would do were he in the U.S. Senate? Are you similar to their positions? Would you have been different from their positions? The action that you would have taken would have been the same or different?
Well, it would have been what I just said. Katz and Coons, they would have, because they're not strong leaders, they would have waffled on which way to go.
You suspect that? Uh-huh.
Yes. And Coons didn't act. He didn't rise up in the Senate and push action to stop the arms going into Israel and into attacks into Gaza. And you can see that with the protests happening outside his house. Folks are really upset with him not taking an action, not taking a stand. He was standing with Israel, just kind of the mantra, but that's it. He didn't have the backbone to like walk off that fence and go either side. So why? Yeah, I have to ask him. But from my point of view, he didn't have the leadership capability to have personal courage, as they would say in the Army, to take a stand. I don't see that kind of action or integrity from integrity. I won't see that kind of nuance coming from Katz either. Very much a walk the line and see where the wind's blowing and then go that way.
Okay, so now let me take you to still on the international front. What do you have to say about the petrodollar system? It's getting more and more attention, isn't it, than it used to? The petrodollar system going back to 1974, the idea that certain member countries, the OPEC countries, the oil-producing countries, are to sell oil in dollars, and they're then to invest the profits from the sale of that oil in U.S. assets, maybe treasury debt, it might be U.S. private sector, and we're supposed to provide the military protection. So what's your take now on this petrodollar system? Starts in 1974. What do you think of it now? Is it still in play? Is it needs some improvement? Are we losing it? What's your take on the petrodollar system? So we're talking worldwide now. We're not just talking about Iran per se. Yeah,
the petrodollar system, as you described it, is over. The system was designed as a way to protect the Middle East from the encroachment of the Soviet Union. So, hey, Saudi Arabia, hey, Gulf states, you always have American protection, but you have to sell your oil in dollars, and of course invest it in Europe and what have you. That has changed because the security agreement alignment in the Middle East has changed. The Board of Peace is now a reality. You can have the United States have bilateral relations with each country as equals, not as Israel first and then everyone else is a close second or far second. So now that they're all in the same playing field, there's no need to have this kind of Cold War zero-sum game in the Middle East anymore. In fact, today at Trump's cabinet meeting.
Let me just mention something for the benefit of our listeners. So you're talking about the Board of Peace now. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Board of Peace and tell us how that's changing relationships between the United States and countries in the Middle East?
To me, a before and after picture is better. So before the Board of Peace, American foreign policy was essentially enforced by having Israel as our unsinkable aircraft carrier. So we could deploy Israel to knock certain countries into alignment if they fell out of our grace. With that kind of stick approach, you kept the Middle East in line enough, but you also made the Arab states angry. And so they would always retaliate against Israel to retaliate against America. So you had this going on for almost 50 years. And so it culminated with the Gaza, with the October 7th. And once Trump took power, he was able to remove that old style of security arrangements. No more petrodollar, no more petrodollar defense. It is a Board of Peace. The United States does not see Israel as the preeminent power to be supported in the Middle East to push our foreign policy. It is an equal amongst all Middle East powers. And they're all to trade, have relations with each other, and with the United States, all on equal footing. That's huge. That changed the calculus right away.
Let me ask you, there's been a lot of assertions dropped that Mr. Trump follows he does what Prime Minister Netanyahu wants him to do. Do you think that's the case? Do you think he does what they tell him to do, or do you think makes up his own mind where it comes to the Middle East?
I think when you hear a conversation like that, those are the folks who liked it the old way. They liked it where Israel was our unsinkable aircraft carrier to enforce foreign policy with a stick.
So
he removed that.
Put the blame on Israel if something went wrong, but they could get us into a conflict, perhaps, or a retaliation that we wanted to get into, some action that we wanted to take. We could blame them, though. They're responsible for us being dragged into it. In fact, we actually were the ones who wanted a particular action to take place.
It was a great piñata for 50 years. So by removing that piñata, you remove the petrodollar system. And today, during President Trump's cabinet meeting, the Department of Interior, whose name escapes me right now, he openly said the world energy and finance center of gravity moved from the Middle East to America. I can't understate that enough. Where it was, the Middle East had the power base for the monetary and minerals, for, in this case, oil. That's now moved to the United States. Not that we won't get oil from the Middle East anymore, or that financing won't happen, but the power base has moved to the United States because we've shown our ability to.
That's an interesting observation. There are plenty of individuals who say, on the contrary, the base of power has moved toward BRICS. Or if anything, we now have a multipolar system where you have at least two poles, one led by Communist China, the other led by the United States. That brings me on to the next point here, which is, tell me a little bit about U.S.-China relations. Of course, the president just visited Xi Jinping, a couple of weeks ago. So how do you view U.S.-China relations, good, bad, and different, and what should we be doing differently if something is needing to change?
So the latest national security strategy put it out pretty plainly. China is no longer a preeminent threat. It is a competitor, but it is not a existential threat to the United States of America. It is a partner to work with. It is still a peer or near peer. We'll watch. We will still maintain our dominance in the military, but it's not this boogeyman that's been made out to be for the last 20 years. Now, for sure, they have a strong economic base, and they've been taking advantage of the United States for many, many years. And as Trump would say, it's because we've had stupid presidents who've allowed it to happen, but not making good deals. And a lot of that is true. Back when China was allowed into the World Trade Organization, there was the guiding theory was, okay, yeah, they're a dictatorship, there's the Chinese Communist Party, but maybe lots of dollars in trade going into China will change the economy, will change the equation of their governance. Maybe we'll go from a communist, maybe slowly towards more Jeffersonian utopia, which didn't happen, obviously. That idea, that thesis failed over the years, but folks still clung on to it. And then as it started to fail, I'll say during the Obama years, we started turning China into the boogeyman. And it's a great pivot happened during the Obama administration where we pivoted to Asia.
He actually used the term great pivot, didn't he?
Yeah.
Or a pivot toward Asia. I think that was the
pivot toward Asia.
Yeah.
And it was mainly because there was a lack of vision of how we should interact with China.
Well, there's something about China that disturbs me greatly, and that has to do with their economic strength. Let's get the facts out, first of all. And I've looked very closely at this in recent videos that I've produced, America Resurgent has produced. So right now, U.S. inflation-adjusted GDP is $9.5 trillion. We have been in recession since 2009. Now, you're going to tell me, well, that's contradicting what we've been told. We've been told that we're growing 2 or 3% a year. Well, where do I get the idea that we've not been growing? Well, there's an organization called Shadow Government Statistics. What they've done is they've taken the measuring stick that had been used by the U.S. government up to 1983, and they've continued to use that very same measuring stick. What the government has done is they have manipulated the measuring stick to make it appear as if inflation is less than it really is, to make it appear as if the inflation-adjusted GDP is greater than ours really is. So if you look that through, it's 9.5 trillion. And then when I try to determine the real GDP of communist China, it's 16.7 trillion. And we can argue a little bit back and forth. That's almost twice the GDP of ours. So what's happening here? So you're telling me that we're not to be concerned about communist China, when in fact they may have in effect an economy twice the size of ours, and they still have the Communist Party ruling the country. And you're telling me we shouldn't be concerned about that. So first, what is your thoughts about how we measure inflation and GDP, if that's something you thought about? And secondly, what would you do differently, U.S. vis-a-vis communist China? So just say one thing at a time. What do you think about those figures?
So if it's been my running assumption since the 2008 global monetary crisis.
Financial crisis, right?
Yeah, I call it monetary, but financial. I call it monetary because it's the euro-dollar system that froze up. The monetary system froze up, not the financial system. Financial system is attached to the monetary system. The euro-dollar system froze up because of lack of trust, and then that cascaded into the financial system, as we can see it.
Okay.
But still, I agree. We've been in a stealth depression since '08. We haven't been growing like we should be growing since that 2008 crash.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to call it a stealth depression, right? I'm using the polite term recession, but I'm not sure I'd go as far as call it a depression. But anyway, I'm defining recession. You've had no growth, or maybe a little bit less than no growth, but the actual numbers are it's been zero flat, inflation adjusted growth. That's what the numbers really are.
But it's just the delta, like over time, that the lost GDP, lost production over time is getting greater and greater, and we haven't adjusted yet. That's why
we haven't.
Sorry, pivoting on to economics, but
the 2008-2009 crisis, we really haven't recovered from it. You're saying we've just kind of drifted.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's what I'm seeing too. All right. So, but meantime, though, China has been growing 4%, 5%, 6% inflation adjusted, if we believe the numbers.
I don't believe that.
Well, okay, but if we were,
if you think our numbers are suspect in the United States, I can only imagine what the CCPs are like. So some of the numbers I because again, it's hard to do
what numbers do you work with?
Comparisons.
Uh-huh.
So our, what's the phraseology? It's for the American citizens, we earn about $60,000 on average per year. In China, it's like $4,000 a year.
Uh-huh.
So again, apples and oranges, when you start looking at different countries, you can't just comparing GDP is not enough. Now, if China per capita, if they were earning $60K per year, I'd be worried. Very worried. When you have like 1.4,
that would be a big problem. But it's not that
great.
That's right.
So that's why the calculus doesn't add up under the headline numbers of GDP. Now, will China ever get its act together? No. They will never be able to achieve what the United States is able to achieve because they don't have the ability to be creative. And that creativity is stomped down because they have a communist government. Mm. So we don't allow that creativity to blossom and be dynamic. You start disappearing your CEOs if they get too bold. That's happened in China. In the United States, it's the opposite. We have Elon Musk. We have other titans of industry who are growing and building great things, and our government applauds it. We don't stamp it down. And so unless China changes,
where do people want to invest? They want to invest in the United States. Typically, they don't want to invest in communist China for a variety of reasons. Well, having said all that, so I guess we're essentially seeing the same thing, that yes, China's economy by some measurements is larger than ours. We have certain advantages. They may have some different advantages. What do you do? Would you do anything differently than Mr. Trump has been doing vis-a-vis China? How do you feel about U.S.-China policy? China policy? Should we be doing what we're doing, or should we make any changes to it?
I think we maintain the status quo. Again, a clutch. We talk about DIME. Let's go through DIME: diplomatic, information, military, and economic. From a diplomatic stance, keep doing what we're doing. The Xi going to the United States, Trump going to China, having a big talk. Perfect. Keep it up. Great conversation. Having the surrounding countries forming an alliance with the United States, both militarily and economically, very good. So you're kind of doing containment light. The information space, that's where it gets kind of tricky. The opponents in the United States against Trump will say that China is the big boogeyman, that we must be constantly building our military force and our economic and diplomatic efforts to defeat the CCP. We're not in a Cold War against China. We're nowhere near a Cold War against China. But folks want to make that analogy for a variety of reasons. I think it's a way to make money. It's a way to get votes. It's very easy for folks to understand.
Well, if we're not in some serious if we're not confronting China, then why aren't we getting more help vis-a-vis Iran?
Because China's not there. I mean, they're a long way away. I mean, it's one thing if, say, China was bordering Iran, then you can have a lot of influence. Yeah, for sure. China has sent military arms to Iran and Venezuela and has done this much for both countries. The United States has China by the gonads. Oil-wise.
How do we have an advantage over China?
We control the sea lanes. We control what oil or any kind of commerce leaves the Middle East, enters into Asia. You can't underestimate the power of the U.S. Navy over its ability to influence the quality of life of China just by
in China. And I would have to agree with you. If we look at what is Chinese consumption, importing, I should say, of oil, I think is around 11 million barrels a day, and about half of that came out of the Persian Gulf until February 28, or the first couple of days of March of this year. So they're hurting. They're not getting all the oil that they need to get. And we having control of the sea lanes, of course, interdicts that or threatens to cut off that flow. In fact, we have cut off that flow of oil. So there is an advantage we have over them. However, what about the situation with rare earth elements and silver? Rare earth elements and REE, as they say, and silver. What about that? Do they have any advantages over us?
Time and space. So for the longest time, we've allowed China to be the world's manufacturing base, and so we just shopped, Amazon or rare earths from Asia, from China.
Globalization was a safe bet. Globalization was a safe bet.
Yeah, exactly. But then COVID changed everything. COVID made us realize the vulnerabilities of our supply chain, and if our supply chain is even a little bit compromised by either countries being selfish because of a great pandemic, or even attitudes towards a particular geography like Taiwan, then you're at risk of being controlled by a foreign power because of that particular rare earth. So we have to buy time with China while we build our own internal resource, our own supply chain for rare earths, and as well use our diplomatic arms and economic trade agreements with other nations to fill the gap. But again, this is not in some ways, it's a zero-sum game. We need the rare earths, but again, we're not in a Cold War with China. I want to reemphasize that over and over again. We trade with China a lot. The trade imbalances we've had in the past, it's just because the CCP was taking advantage of some poor deals happening from the United States, and rolling that back has been, at least for Trump, a two-term effort. So yes, China.
Do you think? Let me stop you there for a second. Do you think that Mr. Trump's tariff policy has been a good thing? The tariff policy of Trump 47.
Absolutely.
So if you're in the U.S. Senate, you would reinforce that policy. You would support. You would applaud and reinforce his tariff.
So the way in which President Trump was using tariffs, and then that mechanism was shot down by the Supreme Court, I would push legislation to give him that power, or any president that power. The power of being able to tariff and control the flow of commerce coming into the United States, frankly, is, in my opinion, a task of the executive power, the executive branch. I don't agree with the Supreme Court's ruling on that. I think more technical than it was, philosophical, the plenary powers of the President of the United States. But drawing out a particular act that enables a president to do such things is really, really important.
So let me ask you a couple more things on the international scene, but just spend a few minutes on these and then get on to the national and the Delaware scenes. So what's your take on the Russo-Ukraine war? Who's at fault? Is the administration proceeding the right way? If not, how would you do things differently? So first thing is, who's at fault for the U.S. for the Russo-Ukraine war, which starts in February 2022?
Well, a little knowledge on myself. In 2014, I was at U.S. European Command. I was at that time I was an activated lieutenant colonel, briefly activated for a few years. And once Russia went into Ukraine the first time in 2014, we realized we had no institutional understanding of Russia anymore. The inventory of our knowledge base of Russia had atrophied since the Cold War ended. Our Cold Warriors were dead, dying, and retired. And so we started an initiative, the Russia Strategic Initiative, in Stuttgart, Germany, at U.S. European Command, to help us reboot our understanding of Russia at a fundamental level within the entire military, then, of course, USG. So whose fault was it? So I'm saying that only because I had some understanding of this. Whose fault was it? For sure, it's Putin's fault for attacking, no doubt. Particularly the second attack happening in the 2020s. The first attack was a direct
2022. You mean when he attacked in 2022?
Right, 2022.
Okay.
In 2014, when he went in the first time, that was a result of the Maidan revolt there in Kiev. So Putin went into Ukraine to secure Ukraine, to ensure he has access to the Black Sea, a warm water port. That problem with Russia is almost 1,000 years old. Russia having access to a warm water port, not a new issue. What changed was how aggressive the European Union was in bringing Ukraine into its fold, and how Putin was seeing it as an existential threat to his power in Russia. So again, whether it's rational that that Putin was looking at this as an existential threat is irrelevant. He sees it that way. From a European point of view, they were expanding their zone of control. They were bringing in new nations, and Ukraine did not want to be part of Russia at all. There's a lot of history that says why. But again, you had this irreconcilable differences between the EU and Russia. The EU wants to expand and become, as Winston Churchill said, a United States of Europe to prevent war from ever happening on the continent. And Russia going, hey, these guys are getting too big. As EU expands, so does NATO. The line stops here. So now you're hitting these two ideological plates that are rubbing against each other like tectonic plates. So now with 2022, the no kidding invasion of Ukraine, where you have hundreds of thousands of troops moving in and getting slaughtered at first. That's all on Putin. But I would also say it's also all on Boris Johnson. In the summer of 2022, he had a chance to turn this off. I can't remember where they went. It was Istanbul or it must have been Istanbul, where Boris Johnson told the Ukrainians, "Don't make a deal. Keep fighting. You can win." So Boris Johnson was representing the European Union. Even though they were out of the EU, they were still representing the power elite of Europe who wants to keep Ukraine in the fold. Boris Johnson is responsible for all those people dying after that date. He could have easily said, "Stop, Ukraine, make a deal," and it wouldn't be a nice deal, but at least the mass killing would have stopped. And who knows how that could have shook out afterwards.
So what would you do differently now? What would you do if you represent us in the U.S. Senate now? What would you do about U.S.-Russian relations, U.S.-Russia's policy? What would you do differently, if anything? You think Mr. Trump is doing everything he possibly can? Let's ask that first question. Can he do more? Can the Trump administration do more?
Yes, and I think he's doing it now. So that's where we get into revisiting the Iranian war conflict. The closing of the Straits of Hormuz is a feature of the plan, not a flaw. So you're killing a lot of birds with one stone in that action. One, you're constricting China, waking them up to their understanding that we control the sea lanes. So A, you can negotiate with China. Two, as we talked about earlier, ending the petrodollar system and revamping the security and energy and finance and transportation and insurance industry in the Middle East. And three, you're squeezing the EU, who have been reluctant to end the war in Ukraine. They're like, so one more month, we can do it. One more month, we can do it. And Trump has control of the Straits and is keeping that oil from going to Europe, oil and gas. Europeans are like, oh, okay, I'm hoping, this is a hope now, it's actually this policy.
You're making use of
it brings them to the table also. That's why I think this is lasting so long, because all these different blocks are trying to fall into place. So if you have an EU saying, okay, we can't go any further, and the same with Russia, they can't go any. The battle lines have been pasted with blood. Stop the war, solidify the lines of contact as a new border, declare a truce, and then finally a peace somehow, and we'll figure it out later.
Well, let me step in here. So what we don't know what the Trump administration necessarily is going to do vis-a-vis Russia going forward. But I think what I'm hearing from you saying is, if you're in the U.S. Senate, you would be giving speeches, you would be rallying your colleagues and the country toward this notion of making the Iran naval blockade, put it to advantage, put it to putting pressure on our European allies to pull back from Ukraine.
No, you can't say that. No, I wouldn't say that. It's an interesting second order effect of the closing of the Straits. I would never tell the American people your gasoline prices are higher because I'm trying to squeeze Europeans in order to make the
right. But this is an aftermath, a consequence, a byproduct of naval blockade. So we don't like the situation we're in, but let's make use of it while we're in it.
Yes.
All right. In that sense, you would be okay. You'd do that. Let me ask you now about Venezuela. Was that intervention? Well, first of all, was it just? Was it legal, constitutional? Was it strategic? Or I guess let me make it simpler. Was it expedient? Was it also principled and expedient? The sacking of Modular. What would you say?
Yes. It was entirely in the realm of the.
So something that should have been done, and then you believe it was also done in a legal fashion, or the president had the legal authority to do what he did.
He did absolutely. There's already an outstanding warrant. You can almost say this was a police action. This was a law enforcement action. In fact, on the... Wait,
you're saying, I didn't hear that. You're saying it was or was not a law enforcement?
It was a law enforcement action.
So law enforcement action, okay.
Yeah, a little robust, obviously, but there were law enforcement personnel on the helicopters flying in to pluck out Maduro.
That can be just a coincidence, or that's window dressing, but you think that has a lot to do with it.
That's getting lost in the weeds, though. I mean, bigger picture, because Trump thinks at the strategic level.
Yeah.
Why do it at all? And the whole point of taking Maduro out and transforming that government, releasing its the stranglehold he had over it, is to stop the drug trade, the money flow, the laundered money flow coming out of these countries for the drug trade, and that they all go into the Cayman Islands or all these other offshore safe havens, where the money gets laundered and gets put into wherever. Cutting that off kills many birds with one stone also again. So you're crippling the drug trade. You're crippling whoever is receiving that laundered money at the other end. And I can only speculate who.
I think there's no dispute about that. It did help us. It did minimize or did reduce the drug trafficking. I think there's no question about that. There is something, though, in the U.S. Constitution, I believe, about Congress's prerogatives that they are to declare war. And in that same sentence where the Constitution says that Congress should declare war, I believe it also says that they have the say on capture of property on land and sea. So it would extend to that. It's not just they have the power to declare war, they have the power to declare what should be captured on land and sea. So the president was capturing Venezuelan vessels on at sea, he wasn't seeking a declaration from Congress. So there are those, for instance, Senator Rand Paul, who said, in fact, it was illegal and unconstitutional, but you would say, no, it was something within the president's purview. He had the right to do that. Okay,
Absolutely.
Having discussed these international matters, let's come over to now national policy. So, and you've talked about American Renaissance. You have this vision for a revitalized American economy, including a much more innovation and creativity. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, about how you would make things, how you make the American economy better?
The basis of any modern economy is energy, the production of energy.
Okay.
So, codifying in law wherever possible, President Trump's actions to expand the industrial base to grow our energy base, make that happen, particularly with nuclear. Small modular reactors, in my mind, as well as natural gas turbines and even coal, I think are bridging methods to get to the ultimate, which is nuclear power for most cities and industries in America. It's the power density that's the key part of nuclear power. I mean, you can cover the state of Delaware with solar panels, or just have one modular reactor powering it all, about the size of 3 or 4 McDonald's. It's that powerful.
Is there a terrorist threat, though? If these small reactors, can they be seized by unsavory characters? Is there any risk to that?
Very, very small. I mean, the types of uranium you would use for this, or even thorium, you would still have to enrich that uranium somehow to make it into a weapon. The quantities inside such a device is small. Having it protected in certain ways, underground, security, very easy to do.
Well, now we're talking about that. Let me step in here for a second and ask you about relative to energy, about global warming and climate change. Is this a problem? Is the Earth burning up? Is that, in your view, happening? Is global warming a real and present danger?
Whether the Earth warms up or cools down, that's up for the Earth to decide. The consequences, the thread being pulled through this climate activists and climate policies is that humans are causing this to happen, which to me is unrealistic, because in every piece of literature I've read about this, the sun is not taken into account as much as they would like it to be, or not like it to be. To me, and I think I said this to you earlier, the threat of climate change has always been with us since there's been humans. The Romans had their problems with climate change back in the day, because it got cold, got warm, crops failed, and things happened that they couldn't recover from, or were able to recover from. We are more resilient now to any kind of climate calamity than ever before. Particularly
if anything, we should be less concerned than even the Romans would have been.
Yeah, short of like a solar flare that knocks out your iPhone, I think we're fine.
All right. So why do so many Americans think that global warming is a fact? What's happening? Why is that?
Well, 20 years of being pummeled by mass media that you are the problem because you drive an SUV or you fly an airplane for making the globe warm or cool. I mean, in the 80s, it was all about global cooling. We're about to freeze to death. Now, Al Gore's hockey chart, we were supposed to be boiling to death right now, and then never happened. So again, why does this climate thing even exist?
Have you looked at who might be behind the global warming concern? Who might be? Who's
global institutions? The globalist, the air quotes globalist. How do you have a global governance that's able to move and shape policy around the world? So you have the United Nations, you have the EU, you have World Trade Organization, the WEF, all these different acronyms, these international global governing organizations that are trying to set policies and standards for the world to pivot on. But you cannot have a real global governance without the ability to tax. So once this international global organizations are able to institute the carbon tax.
The carbon tax, yeah.
You're able to bring in funds from these different nations in order to do things. Right now, the United Nations is going hand in hand every year to get funding to do things. There's no tax. It's all agreements to maybe pay the UN fees to make it work. But if the UN had the ability to tax, that's a different story altogether.
Has the Democrat incumbent, Mr. Coons, said anything about a carbon tax?
I can't recall, other than he is a climate change backer. He thinks we should dial back.
He's a believer in global warming. He thinks it's.
He's a believer, so he wants windmills in Delaware. He wants solar panels everywhere. Everyone drives an electric car.
We're getting a little bit into the Delaware aspects. As I want to hold that off a little bit, but I couldn't help but bring it up right now. And how about Dr. Cass? Does he believe in global warming or not? Have you heard him say anything about it?
Well, it depends on in this case, what election he's running for. So if you asked him back in 24 when he was running as an independent, I would say he was more of a climatologist.
Interesting. He was concerned about global warming, more inclined to be concerned back then.
But once he became a Republican
he's not so concerned.
He's not so concerned. So again, it's whatever way the wind's blowing.
So what we're hearing, there's definitely some differences here among the three of you, I would say. Okay. But let's come back again, though, to the economy as a whole. So you've got a vision for boosting American energy, and you're very interested in or very supportive of the nuclear energy industry. What else could you do to help our energy problems? What else could you do? Or what would you do for us if you were in the U.S. Senate vis-a-vis energy?
Well, I think what President Trump is doing now is adequate.
Well, on the fossil fuel side.
Yeah, on the fossil fuel side, drill baby drill.
Okay.
On the policy side for nuclear energy, we should codify some of the Department of Energy's ability to fund through either loans or some type of merit or grant. So states can go to the Department of Energy and say, hey, I want to build a small modular reactor. I want to help spread the power out. I need money for power lines or what have you. Permanently give the Department of Energy the mechanism to do such things. Give them the keys to and the capabilities to allow Delaware to build small modular reactors without.
What I'm hearing is some deregulation on the energy front. That's what I'm hearing, and also keeping in mind the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Let the states breathe a bit. Let them have some room for latitude for action. That's what I'm hearing from you. True
deregulation, but the key part here I'm saying is the Department of Energy, for their particular focus, their infrastructure focus, has a loan mechanism, has the ability to through the act of Congress.
Now are we getting into infrastructure discussion?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. Okay.
So now the state of Delaware, instead of worrying about how we're going to pay for these, the upfront cost of building any kind of infrastructure, particularly nuclear, if they're able to take out a loan or even a grant from the Department of Energy to jumpstart the process, giving Department of War, I think they already have this with the latest NDAA, the ability to have a mechanism where the Department of War can invest in the defense industrial base to make it more quick in developing new weapons or producing ammunition at speed. The same mechanism now exists in the Department of Energy. So the other entities can have the same kind of power mechanism. So we can leverage the federal government's ability to take on its shoulders this huge burden of large industrial scale infrastructure works, and not crush a small state like Delaware in its ability to fund such a thing when it needs it. So in this case, small modular reactors still in the research and development phase, but going as fast as humanly possible, much faster than it has been in the last, say, 16 years with Chris Coons and the nuclear commission committees going nowhere. The last year,
we're trading on the Delaware issues. I want to make sure we go back to that, but
yeah. So having these mechanisms at play that give states the ability to leverage financing and expertise from the federal government, from the departments.
Has America ever done that? Have we done that before? Do we have a precedence for this? We're talking about infrastructure spending, right?
Yes.
And lending for infrastructure.
Lincoln did it after the Civil War. FDR did it during the Great Depression.
So we have good, successful precedents for this.
Exactly.
And that's what you were talking about, tapping. I know we've talked about this offline before. It was very interesting. In fact, I think our first conversation, that was one of the first topics that came up. I was very intrigued by that.
This idea of a national bank of infrastructure.
Right, and infrastructure. Let me take you now over to artificial intelligence. So, there's a lot of concern in our state about AI data centers, as there are across the country. So, where are you on the? Talk to us about artificial intelligence, of what the strengths and weaknesses, or I should say, the risks and the benefits of AI, and how you would step in to obviously help us with the benefits and minimize.
Yeah, so my last 3 years as a government civilian. Was at the Pentagon. I worked on a data policy for the Department of Defense, now Department of War. And part of that was for the artificial intelligence. So I worked in the Chief of Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office there at the Pentagon for the Secretary of Defense. So one of the core elements of what is AI, AI is nothing more than statistics at scale. It is a generator of.
Say that again. I did say that again.
AI is statistics at scale.
Statistics at scale. Okay.
Yes. It's a big probability machine.
Okay. Okay.
With its ability to train on a large amount of data, and then understand after each word what predict what word should follow, and make that sentence work, be worthwhile. That's all it is. It's not alive. It's not creative as you would think creativity is. And here's a good example. Again, I'm trying to be basic with AI before we get into how we manage it. Artificial intelligence cannot create new. It's not possible. It can create an arrangement of different things from the past and put them together to make something. An example is, say you have a musician, and he cherry picks a bunch of different melodies and whatnot from a bunch of different artists, puts it together, and makes a hit. That's what AI does. But also, you can have alongside him is a musician who creates something brand new without looking at the past at all. Only humans can do that. That's where we get into the idea that we are made in the image of God. Only the human brain, as a spirit, as a living entity, can create new. The machine cannot do that. It's not designed to do that. It's not capable of doing it. It can never do what a human does, which is create whole cloth new. So it's a really important distinction. AI is nothing more than statistics at scale.
So how about these AI data centers? So how does that?
Well, now, there is great power in AI. That's why a lot of governments are spending an arm and a leg to make it happen. So where I talked about kind of a flaw, has just statistics it's just statistics at scale, but that ability to take a huge data set and run through the different permutations to find some answers is great power. So you can imagine, I think Google DeepMind did this with a protein folding. You take a protein and predict how it will fold over time. That helps you create new drugs. It helps you identify disease, helps you maybe genetically modify something in order to cure a disease. It would take humans thousands of years to do what this machine could have done over the weekend.
So we want to tap into that. We want more of that.
Yes.
But there's a risk involved too. What do you see? What risk do you see? And what's the chances that these things will turn bad? And what can you do to head that off for us? What could you do if you?
The risk is not the machine itself. The risk is how we use it. So here's why I'll differ with Elon Musk. Elon Musk says we need UBI, universal basic income for everyone, or universal basic income. To me, that's a death knell to humans. Once you start giving people free cash just to play video games or not do any work, humanity starts going down quick because there's no purpose in life. You need a drive in life. So if you have AI that takes care of all your needs and gives you some entertainment, and you have a government or at least a society that says, yeah, we reward you for doing nothing. Here's some UBI, enjoy yourself. AI will just be an enabler, but because it's capable, it'll be a great enabler and enable us to fall as a society. So,
and you see Elon Musk is taking us down that path.
He's not taking us down that path.
But he
sees the future like the easy button is give people money. That's what he's hitting the easy button on that one. The hard button, the one that's a bit more dynamic, it's not an easy quick win, is turning the idea around. The human mind, again, as I said earlier, very creative. If we teach our kids and our university grads how to think, how to be creative thinkers, a classical education, not just pockets of schools that teach a classical education, but the baseline is that we teach a classical education to kids. So they understand logic, rhetoric, humor, and they can look.
This is very interesting. So you're saying that if you really want to maximize the benefits of AI and reduce the risks of AI, you also need to be thinking about the kind of education you're providing to the we humans that are using the AI. So having said that, how do you improve American education? What would you do for us in the U.S. Senate to improve U.S. education? You're talking about a classical education. Anything specific that comes to mind you would do? There's a very interesting thought that education.
A lot of it is just putting money against the problem is going to help. That's why I developed this Renaissance engine concept, because you need industry to push this idea. You need a demand signal for creative people to be given these AI tools to make things. So when you have a nuclear power, small modular reactor that's powering your data center. If you don't have a data center without its own power, it's useless, and it creates angst in the population. But you have nuclear power powering a data center. The data center is giving compute to a research center. The research center is using great minds coming from young great minds coming from universities in order to make discoveries. And then you have manufacturers, the corporate world, coming in with, hey, how can we make the widget better, faster, more? Let's tap into the compute and the energy and the kids coming out of these universities who have knowledge of how to leverage AI to the max. Let's use them to make a new material. Say Elon Musk, in this case, would love this because we can maybe create a new heat shield for his Starship because you have this symbiotic relationship. So you have nuclear power powering data centers, powering with compute and power research facilities that are being fed great minds from our universities, young minds, that are being used to make the economy grow through innovation and manufacturing.
So this is an interesting idea. So there's a lot of concern about AI data centers, and I think a lot of people just say, well, just don't have them at all. And you're saying, no, you can have them, but they need their own source of energy. And I think that often is losing that in the debate. What about the risk of a surveillance state coming about? The idea is AI could be used to maximize the surveilling of the American population. What do you have to say about that? How would you stop that from happening?
I would argue it's already happened. You can pick up your phone right now. This phone tracks you, does all the things a dystopian society. So
it's already happening. Are you going to let that continue, or what are you going to do if you represent us? How would you protect us from that getting worse, or how could you roll it back?
You can't be draconian about this. Let me explain something first. The speed at which AI can do calculations, come up with new paths to solve problems. Can also predict how you would shop, how you would live, how you would find your new mate or go to a university. And in the financial world, what company to pick, what house to buy for a company or corporation, what land to acquire. So these things are happening at light speed already, but once you start tokenizing and putting it into a AI machine, it's going to be happening at stupendous speed. So I see going forward the need for a modern Glass-Steagall Act, a digital Glass-Steagall Act. So you would split the economy into two parts-ish. One part is the protected, like a life support system. Your schools, your hospitals, your power, these are not tokenized in the sense that it's part of the casino that is the market. But you have on the other side, the free market, just rocking and rolling with all the greatest toys. But you have this firewall in between, kind of what Glass-Steagall was designed to do after the Great Depression, and which Bill Clinton got rid of in the 90s. But having a digital firewall, and I say firewall for a reason because it's digital, it stops the bots from using your house, using your hospital, your schools as a token to be put on the.
So our home is our refuge. It is a sanctuary to some degree. You want to maintain.
And the firewall does allow finance to come in, but it doesn't. Your house, kind of like the BlackRocks of the world, buying up whole developments in order to get a better rate for investors. Now that gets cut off. I know Trump did it as a EO, but we do it as a piece of legislation.
That's very interesting. Let me take it back again. We didn't really finish up with education. So I was intrigued when you said we're going to have a classical education and you're going to match that up with AI. Again, though, what could we do with education? Do you think that we talk about this idea of a liberal arts education. So you use the term, by the way, Renaissance. You have this American Renaissance vision. Do you think that we prepare an individual to be a Renaissance thinker? Do we make them well-rounded, or do we have them fit in a very, they just simply a widget in a bigger machine?
So let me go back to the Renaissance engine.
And what's good and bad about that?
Yeah, so the cool thing about this engine is it creates a demand signal for universities. For the kids who would go into these research facilities, or who would program the AI, or who would work at these advanced manufacturing facilities, they can't just be another bot. They can't be able to do math and whatnot. They have to think above the AI. You're here and the AI's here. You have to be creative. You have to understand, in some ways, you have to understand music.
See, you're talking about truly liberal arts education. You got to be well-rounded. That's what I'm hearing from you. All right. Yeah. So is that
it goes against, you hear a lot of folks say, oh, you have a wasted degree in liberal arts. And the answer is yes, because you haven't, in your university training, you haven't connected it to the real world. So the real world would be, hey, you're going to be a master of arts, but you're also going to understand the physics of the universe. So with these two things paired, you're able to take a bot or a series of bots and use them to the max, because you have a creative mind, you understand how the system works.
Yeah.
And it can be a huge plus to an employer.
This is very intriguing and actually, frankly, exhilarating, to hear you talk this way. But I want to bring you back, though. There's a great impediment. How would you as senator, deal with that? Which is to say, America education is the way it is, I'm afraid to say, because a lot of the titans of industry back in the year 1900 wanted a compliant workforce. And that's what they got. So now how are you going to go up to these very same, the successors, the offspring of these people, and tell them, your predecessors got it wrong. We don't want a compliant worker. We want a well-rounded individual. We want to be able to maximize AI. We don't want AI to dominate us. We want to still be the dominant element.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find
how do you talk sense to the financial elite, to the great powers that be in our society?
I think they're already ahead of you. They want advanced kids who are thinking in this different.
Kids.
Our school system is designed for the 19th century, period. Back, as you were saying, the compliant workforce was, I needed workers to work in the factory to do 1, 2, 3 to make money.
No, hold on a second. You said the 19th century, so I'm hearing 1800s. Sometimes it's hard to keep, sometimes say 20th century, 19th, what do you really mean? So you're telling me this is designed for the 1800s. So that's prior to 1900. Our school system is.
At the start of the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
So
it's a very important observation. It's very important.
Because it makes sense because, now I'm going to pull back my memory. I think in Delaware, the School Act was passed in like 1892 or 1897, something like that. That developed the school board system, kind of the infrastructure we have now. And it was required because you had such a rural agricultural environment, even back then. How do you connect different towns and villages outside of Wilmington so they would be part of the system? So you needed a school board system and structure. And how do you get kids to, once they're in school, be productive in society? So you have a DuPont who wants to make a product. They need kids of a certain caliber, they railroads, shipping, chemical.
We're talking about school is really an apprenticeship. It's a worker training program. It's not
exactly.
Okay, so you're saying
the model was based on the needs of
okay. So you're saying that the titans of the economy today understand this change, that they need to have a well-rounded thinker. They need a critical thinker. Is what you're saying. If America's
exactly.
So in other words, you're saying you're not going to be up against resistance. You're going to be actually walking in step with them.
Oh, exactly.
I hope you're right. I have my doubts. Now, let me take you now to the thing we haven't talked about, which is the debt, the public debt. I mean, before I even say that, what is the major problem we're facing with the debt? When I say the debt, what comes to mind?
If we did not have in this case, an American First agenda with Donald Trump, the debt would be a big problem. Joe Biden, that kind of socialist mindset where you can just print money to make everyone happy, it would destroy the United States completely. You can't obviously print your way out of a problem. Donald Trump is going through like the supply side part of growing the economy in order to fix the debt. You have to grow yourself out, and growing yourself out not only just solves the problem of the debt, but it solves the problem of your schools and employment, quality of life. All these things are elevated when you go towards more supply side economics.
Can you point toward a couple of case study, if you would, where we've grown out? I didn't say necessarily the United States, but a country has grown out of debt.
During the 80s, when you had Reagan actually hit print and go full speed on defeating the Russians through the mass buildup of our industrial base and build weapons for the Cold War, that pushed a huge amount of money into the system. So we had the great 80s. We also had the great moderation that happened after the inflation flux in the 70s. So you had all this money in the system, lower inflation, that lasted 20 years.
So what I'm hearing is Reagan, to some degree, he increased the debt, or he helped us grow out of the debt. Which was it?
He increased the debt. But he created the financial and manufacturing base in order to handle it and to start growing out of it. Because, in the 90s, there was everyone was giving the golf clap to Bill Clinton for balancing the budget, or at least the yearly deficit. That was only possible because Reagan built the industrial base for us to grow. And then he had the new, air quotes, new economy of the internet economy in the 90s, take full advantage of it. And we did our own goal, by a few years later by letting China into the World Trade Organization too early.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing, letting China in?
It was a bad thing.
So that's in 2001. We let China come into the WTO.
It was bad. I had to talk both sides of my mouth in this one. Because it was bad for the United States because our manufacturing base was hollowed out. But it was good for China. A lot of people who were, in abject poverty rose out of it.
Yes, for them, yeah.
But it was good for them. It was bad for us overall. And then once we hit our 2008 financial crises or monetary crises, that hurt us pretty good as well. We weren't able to grow ourselves out because we didn't have the manufacturing base.
We're straying into international affairs. I'm trying to get us closer and closer to home. And speaking of home, we got to get to Delaware here.
Yeah.
But we're talking, but before we get there, though, I want to hear a little bit more about the debt. So, how are you telling us that you think that President Reagan increased the debt? What about President Trump? Is he growing the debt or decreasing the debt? And then, how does he compare to the previous administration, to the Biden administration? Growing the debt or decreasing, or how does it compare?
So for Biden, he had the Inflation Reduction Act. It was a huge spend. So he increased the deficit.
Under Biden, it was an increase. Okay, and what about
the same with Trump? Trump is spending just as quickly. He wants to raise the defense budget to 1.5 trillion. So there's a lot of spending happening. But again, the other side of the equation is growth. So we're unleashing the power of the American economy by not being hamstrung by globalization. We're able to use tariffs to bring manufacturing back to the United States. $18 trillion is working its way through the system over the past year that Trump's many trade agreements around the world. That's a lot of money. And that more than, if you start thinking of the multiplying effects of that 18 trillion.
Yeah, but the data is showing there's no growth in the inflation adjusted GDP. But wait a minute.
I think
we have the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act added about $1 trillion, I think, to the debt, something like that. I think a little bit less than $1 trillion. But the big beautiful bill, after taking into account growth, according to most economists, is going to add $2 to $3 trillion to the debt.
I think, yeah, I'm remembering the headlines on that one.
That's what
the GAO was talking about.
2%
growth for the next 10 years, and that's not going to happen.
Say that again. No, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry. I was talking.
GAO, the Government Accounting Office, their projections was like 2% growth for the next 10 years, and that would not facilitate the.
No, I've actually looked into this. No, the CBO was saying 2.4 trillion increase in the debt, even taking into account growth.
But their growth was way anemic. It was anemic growth.
Right. Well, yeah, that was right. So the net result is an increase in debt. There's some growth, but there's an increase in debt, and that's more than the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, there's a lot of other spending involved. It's not just one bill on the Trump side and one bill on Biden's side, but those are factors here. So that's going to bring me around to Congressman Massey, who just lost his primary.
Let me hold you there because I'm going to jump too fast from the deficit.
Okay.
Europe, the EU tried doing the cutting the budget. Cutting services, cutting everything in order to manage their debt. And they had Brexit and they had the Greek crises.
Oh, so it didn't work out. They went.
It didn't work. They
took an austerity approach and it didn't work out for them. It's interesting enough. Yeah, interesting.
So if the Democrats were still in office, they had power over the executive, we were still going down this route of less is more. Trump is turning it the other way. More growth will give us a better opportunity to pay down the debt. Just flat out.
More growth. Okay. Now, but as I still come around to the inflation adjusted figures, there's no growth. There's been no growth, period. As of now, there's still no growth, virtually nothing. I don't know what the figures are for the last quarter, but inflation adjusted figures, there's no growth. So, but maybe that will change. But let me ask you now.
I think it'll change in the next Biden midterms.
Maybe if you have something to do with it, there will be a change, hopefully, if you have something to do with it. But let me ask you, though, for a minute about Congressman Massey. So Thomas Massey, as we know, was defeated in his primary last week. Mr. Trump was on the side of his opponent, Massey's opponent. Congressman Massey opposed the big, beautiful bill. He says, well, it's going to add, he thought, over $3 trillion to the deficit after taking into account, to the debt, after taking account of growth. What do you have to say about that observation? Well, actually, what do you have to say about Massey's defeat? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Massey's defeat was an indication of the power of the MAGA base, flat out. And it's a corollary to Mike Castle's defeat in 2010 here in Delaware.
We talked about this. Yeah, it's a very interesting observation.
So Mike Castle and the establishment saw the world in a different way than the everyday voter, in this case, Republican voter in Delaware and in Kentucky, in this case. So Kentucky saw an American first approach, not like the Massey way version, but the Trump version, as the way forward.
So you think this was about Trump's economic vision?
Yes.
The massive defeat. So this is a very interesting observation because a lot of people say, no, it's about his foreign policy vision.
No.
It's not about his, you think it was the economic side.
All politics are local, so it's all about the pocketbook.
That's a very interesting, that's an interesting observation. Now, it so happens, though, that more than half of Massey's opponents' money came from the Israeli lobby. How do you account for that? Is that not a factor in this outcome? More than half came from the Israeli lobby. In fact, his opponent received more money from the Israeli lobby than Massey raised himself. And that I should say that his opponent raised. His opponent raised if you took out the Israeli lobby money that Massey's opponent received, his opponent raised less money than Massey raised.
Yeah.
Did you follow me here? I may have confused myself.
Yeah, I'm trying to work. You're basically saying that Israeli money helped Massey lose.
Well, okay, I may be confusing everybody here. So it looks like, and we still, depending on what source you turn to, you get a different number here. Who earned what, who raised what. But I believe, roughly speaking, Massey raised about 10 million, roughly. And I believe that his opponent, Gowran, received about 25 million. And that about half of what Gowran received was offshore or Israeli lobby money. So you're telling me that the reason—
I don't know about that. I can't. That would be interesting to look at.
It is important to look because we're getting different numbers every time we look at one of these sources.
I would find that really, really difficult to digest that this money came from foreign sources.
Well, not foreign. I misspoke. Israeli, let's say pro-Israeli funding. So the impression they're giving you is that it was offshore money. I don't know about that, but it was Israeli lobby, AIPAC money. That's the impression.
I know. AIPAC has a lot of pool, but
let's instead
$10 million pool or $20 million pool.
Well, instead of us getting into discussing that, I think why might we leave it at this? I think you've made an interesting— I'm talking about Massey. I think you've made an interesting observation that it was the MAGA base that was responsible for his defeat. Another observation that it was on the economic policies that Massey lost. That's another interesting observation. And the third one, the comparison to the state of Delaware with Congressman Castle. So these are three interesting observations. So now, having said that, let's get to Delaware. And we've talked a little bit about this too. So,
well, don't forget Paxton and Corinth in Texas.
Okay, let's look at that for— yeah.
So that was a 10-to-1. No, say Paxton raised 10 million, and the quote establishment party, Republican Party, raised like almost 90 million. It's almost like a 10-to-1 ratio. And the MAGA base won. In this case, the Paxton base won. So
it's reinforcing your argument, is what you're saying.
Yes.
What's just happened with Paxton and in Texas. All right, but let's get away from Texas. Let's come to Delaware. We've been all over the globe. It's been terrific. I hope that our viewers are appreciating that you've got a wide-ranging perspective. You're well-read and you've had a lot of experiences, which I think would come to the benefit of the Delaware and the American voter or taxpayer. But let's take a look now at the case of Delaware. So tell me how you see a U.S. Senate, or I should say a U.S. Senator compared to a U.S. Congressman. And that was interesting, our conversation we had. What's different about them? What is it about? And actually, why did you choose to run for U.S. Senate, not for U.S. House? You take it any order you want to. What is it about the U.S. Senate that you thought was more important to run for than the U.S. House?
I thought my experience in the federal government gave me a different perspective, particularly overseas and in different areas within the Department of Defense. I got to see the problem set that is Delaware in America through the eyes of Europeans, Iraqis, Kuwaitis, South Asians.
South Koreans, let's not forget. Even Asians have been over there too.
Yeah. So when you're able to look, through the eyes of different nationalities, looking at America, you're able to. It's kind of like the old saying: you blindfold someone and you have them kind of touch an elephant, and then have them describe the elephant. If one is just touching the tail, they can't describe the whole beast. But if you have all these different perspectives, you're able to build a better picture of America. how people see America, how people want to see America act or be, how things operate in Germany versus the United States or Delaware or South Korea. Having these different perspectives helps you with problem solving, I think. Gives you at least a leap forward in understanding what has not worked or what worked in the past, and or even just anticipate response. How will folks take this approach, whatever approach that would be? So having that big picture view, to me, gravitates more towards a senatorial position.
Which is, a U.S. senator is a lot closer in responsibility to a president than a congressman is, a U.S. House member is. So I think that's the case you're making. That makes sense to me. I mean, that makes sense. So now tell us, though, about what we face in Delaware, our representation. So we've got these two U.S. senators. We're a very, very peculiar place because we're really a congressional district, and yet we also happen to have two U.S. senators. So we're also a state. So how do you see that? How do you see Delaware in the context of federal office holders?
Right. So we have, three folks in the Congress. Two are Senate and one House of Representatives. Again, it's kind of weird. I think Rhode Island has a similar situation.
Yeah.
So does it affect Delaware negatively? No, I don't think so. Does it? It should help Delaware, where you have two senators.
We're overrepresented.
Yeah. So we should have. We're able to punch above our weight, which is the whole purpose of the Senate. The purpose of the Senate was to represent the state. The Senate is Latin for the state. So by having these two senators, Delaware could be of equals amongst other states. That was the intent of the Constitution. Having your representative based on population, that makes sense. So it's fine. But again, having two senators is quite a powerful combination. So, Senator Biden, now, then the Vice President and President Biden, it's that base of being a senator over many, many years helped him, kind of gravitate towards that level because he had such exposure to, I would say the swamp, but, exposure to the workings of government and other areas. So, because Delaware is small, because we have three representatives in Congress for a small state, we should be running rings around other states and being able to get legislation passed, or at least to influence legislation that will benefit Delaware. I see us not doing that with our current set. Democrat Party tends to be very much a lockstep. Draw within the lines, don't draw outside the lines, or you're out. So that creativity is very much suppressed. I equate the Democrat Party.
We're not all that we could be, to quote from the U.S. Take the U.S. Army motto: "Be all you could." We're not all we could be. Right. Okay.
Exactly. So it is quite a handicap. So you look at Chris Coons' policy decisions. I think Chris Coons is fairly moderate at the core. But if he wants to stay in the party or stay in the seat, he has to follow all the crazy left conversations and policies. And so you've seen that drift over the last 16 years. For sure, back in 2010, during the Senate race, there was no talk about gender issues at all. It wasn't. Now it's, it was a thing, or is still a thing. And you have to have it on your platform, on your website, or your talking point if you're a Democrat.
Right.
So if you asked Chris back in 2010 what he thought on transgender identity and whatnot, he would have laughed and said, "Are you crazy?" But now it's like, it's part of the thing. He has to be in line. That kind of, closed, the blinders on our politicians is a detriment. It really handicaps them in their ability to work with other parties in the Congress, work in different caucuses, develop policies that will help the United States and Delaware. So, short of the Senate or the House of Representatives being dominated by the Democrat Party or any particular party, in this case, Democrat for Coons, he won't be able to maneuver expertly for Delaware within that structure, which is now a Republican held Senate. And I still think the House of Representatives will be red come November as well.
So it's time. I think we've covered a tremendous amount of ground. It's time for you to give us your final thoughts. Think about what we've said, maybe what we didn't get a chance to discuss. Is there a topic that we didn't discuss, or a topic you wanted to say more about?
Yes, I do. So when I decided to really put the pedal to the metal and start this race, back in October, I was talking to my neighbors, and a lot of them are professionals around here, and lawyers or doctors, what have you. And after a beer or two, or just small talk, you found out that they wore a D in their armband, but they were conservative to a degree. They just want things to work. The party was, to them, just an armband or a permission slip to do business in Delaware. That's all it meant. So to me, it was an indication that Delaware needs change, and that the only thing holding back on change was fear. So these professionals who I've talked to or deal with, they will not openly say they support a Republican. You can't go to like the police or the fire and say, "Hey, can you hold a Republican sign?" They go, "No, are you kidding me? I'll lose my job. Or I won't be the police chief anymore." These type of things, this suppression of supporting an opposition party, no matter who it is, whether it's a Republican Party or whatever, again, is stopping innovation from happening in Delaware.
Yeah, it's holding us back. We're not as creative as we could be.
Yeah, so now you have essentially a party that's eating itself. So the Democrat Party has, because of its lack of ability to change or lack of opposition party, is being infiltrated by more left-leaning folks, like the Working Families Party in Delaware.
Yeah.
That is scaring a lot of...
George Soros funded.
George Soros, however they're funded, it doesn't really matter. The fact that they're here and that they are moving Delaware, not liberal, but left of liberal. I think Delaware is fine with being liberal. We're even in the center, back of purple. Delaware is fine with purple. But going left of liberal is starting to scare some folks. And we're starting to see that with the property tax hikes that's happening. So the reassessment, some folks have doubled or tripled their property taxes. I know mine went up 50%. You have now Newcastle County passed an ordinance that it will raise taxes by 17% for property taxes. And that Dover is going to pass legislation that will allow like a one-time 10% increase for school boards to raise things. All this is moving towards more taxes in Delaware because there's not enough creativity in the body politic to come up with ways, innovations to do more with less. So the quick, easy button is pay more taxes to fund the things we think we need. And it's going to be a hard road for Delaware for the next 5 years, I think, unless we're able to really have a renaissance for the conservative movement in Delaware to be that opposition, where we will carry down this road of Delaware-niation of our state, like Californiation.
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought up this topic that we did not touch on. I was going to say, I wish we had said more about the debt and the private debt as well as the public debt. But that said, go back to the point you just made. We need to improve our representation in Washington, D.C. If nothing else, we've got to enhance our creativity. And I think you've already given us a very creative way, or one of the creative ways of dealing with the debt, which is infrastructure spending and an infrastructure bank. I don't hear that coming out of your opponent's position, at least in the Republican primary. So anyway, I want to thank you. This has been a terrific discussion, and I hope we have more of them. I hope more Delawareans get to know you And for that matter, the other folks in the other 49 states get to know you too. Maybe they're going to get a chance to. Well, thank you for having me.
Yes,
Thank you for
Joe, thank you very much. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I do look forward to having this again.
Good.
Great.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, take care.